lag? Do I know? Is that lag?
Oh, yeah.
Leg? Okay. Committee will come to order. Thank you everyone for being here, particularly virtually with us for the second meeting. The purpose of this meeting today is to hear the virtual comments from individuals who had signed up online to be able to give their comments on the redistricting process regarding the congressional maps that have been placed on both the House and or the Senate sites for consideration by the public. Joining us in the room today are the Sergeant at Arms for the House, Nina Legg, it's back here, Thomas Terry, behind me, thank you. For the Senate, Mike Harris and Hal Roach. Where's Hal? Okay. Thank you. Coming in to give you a little bit, I will go down the list of names as they have been in the order in which they signed up. If someone happens to not be there to respond, I will go back through the lists at the end to make sure that we have not missed someone and others. When I call your name to speak, this is a virtual hearing, please raise your hand so that our technical staff here can find you and make sure that you are front and center for everyone being considered. All participants will be muted when they are not recognized by the speak. All speakers will be recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes. So moving right along, the first individual that we have that signed up to speak is Todd Steffel, representing Heretical Reason Productions. If you could raise your hand.
Hello.
And you are live and you're recognized for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for your time and effort going into creating these maps. I'm excited about the redistricting process and hope it remains fair and equal for everyone. I have to admit that I'm very frustrated with both political parties over the last several decades because it seems both of them take the opportunity of the redistricting process to give power to themselves rather than to the people. And unfortunately with these maps, that seems to be a trend that's continuing. I believe strongly that the map should represent a purple North Carolina fairly for people of both political parties in all races and persuasions. These current maps, as I see them, look like they are typical cracking and stacking, with certain political parties taking advantage to gain more power than they should have based on the state as a whole. My particular districts are, I'm up in North Raleigh, and as usual, I've been placed into North Raleigh in 2 of the districts, but for one of the maps, I, for some reason, am lumped in with the border of Virginia, which really harms me in the way I will be personally represented because I do not get the opportunity to have a local person representing me in my interests. So I would please ask that these maps be made fair for everyone, including myself and including members of both parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Members, I will say that while you're speaking, we do have someone keeping time here for us. You will see come up here on the screen when you have 1 minute left, 30 seconds left, or a red placard meaning your timing has expired. So next up we have Ann Morris, who signed up without a privilege. If you could please raise your hand. And they have you up and you're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you listening to me today. My name is Ann Morris. I've lived in Greensboro for 3 decades. I'm a retired journalist, a mother of adult children, and I now stay busy volunteering in my community. I'm speaking today as a concerned citizen, not allied with any group, and I'm commenting on the proposed congressional maps. In September, I testified at the public hearing in Forsyth County and asked, like most people who spoke that day, that Greensboro, High Point, and Winston-Salem be kept in one district because of our common interests as the Piedmont Triad. My testimony and others was clearly disregarded, as none of the maps drawn by the GOP leadership keep the Triad together. As a Greensboro resident, I am especially concerned that Guilford County may be split into 3 districts, which is unnecessary, confusing, and creates ineffective representation. Including parts of Greensboro in a district that stretches to Watauga County in one map, CST2, or Harnett County, map CBK3, makes no sense. We have much more in common with residents of High Point in our own county than we do with residents of the lovely small towns in Allegheny or Ashe counties. It appears that these maps have been drawn to dilute the voices of urban dwellers by cutting up cities and creating largely rural districts. As an illustration of why this matters, I recently attended a food justice summit sponsored by St. James Presbyterian Church in East Greensboro, a church that my church, Westminster Presbyterian in West Greensboro, partners with. We heard statistics about food insecurity in the Triad post-COVID. We heard from Black farmers and faith leaders. We also heard from our congressional representative, who listened to our concerns and shared information about federal programs. We felt heard. We know who represents us. We know who's accountable. Please keep Guilford County together, ideally with Winston-Salem, so the voices of our unique region can be heard. Thank you very much for hearing my comments.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Martha Shaffer. We do not see one. If you could please raise your hand. Martha Shaffer. Not on. Brent Heath, representing Governmental Services. Do you please raise your hand? We do not see you. Karen Heiser. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Karen Heiser, and I live in the Wake County section of Morrisville in Congressional District 2. First, I wanted to thank the committees for holding additional hearings, including having this remote option. However, it is disappointing to me that there are not more hearings on the draft maps. You're taking comments from only 110 people out of an estimated 8.3 million voters. My remaining comments apply to the draft congressional maps. Wake County should not be split into more than 2 congressional districts. All proposed maps drawn by Republicans, CBK3, CMT9, and CST2, split the county unnecessarily into 3 districts. There are no redistricting criteria that require this extra split, and these maps ignore the committee's own criteria to protect our communities. Families in Cary, Apex, Morrisville, and Harley Springs form a community which needs to be respected and protected. On map CBK3 and CST2, the sections of Wake that are fractured and combined with proposed districts 6 and 7 should instead be left intact as a single district. Map CMT9 is simply ludicrous. District 3 is especially egregious. No one in Wake County self-identifies with residents in Onslow County, 115 miles away as the crow flies. CMT9 splits Morrisville off from Cary, which makes no sense, and splits Apex down the middle. This map should be discarded altogether as it depicts the worst fracturing of our Cary, Apex, Morrisville, and Holly Springs community. All 3 Republican maps are the antithesis of protection for our Wake County communities. I look forward to seeing maps enacted that create competitive districts centered around communities and that will yield proportional representation in Congress for all North Carolina voters. Thank you.
Thank you. And to remind members, if we go through and someone is a no-show, we will cycle back through those names to see if they have arrived. Eden White, representing the Fair Elections Roundtable. If you could please raise your hand. No. Okay. Helen Wood.
Sir, I'm here.
Edwin White is here. Okay.
Yep.
You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
I'm sorry that my name was wrong. I forgot what name I signed up by, so that's why my label on the video doesn't show. My name is Edwin Chambly White. I'm a resident of Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm active in the Fair Elections Roundtable with the Piedmont Triad Legal Women Voters. My testimony this evening is mine alone. I'm limiting my remarks to only 2 of the proposed maps due to the time restraints. I believe that the congressional district map labeled CMT9, draft congressional map by Senator Heiser, is racially unfair. It has also been given an F rating by the Princeton Gerrymandering Project because it is unduly partisan in favor of Republicans. I urge the legislators to rethink their work to avoid new lawsuits and a waste of taxpayer dollars. I do support the CS2 draft congressional map by Senator Chaudhry, that's CST6, I think, with an overall grade of A because it shows no partisan advantage. It also ranks as average for competitiveness and geographic features. It also appears to keep the Piedmont Triad cities, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point, together in one congressional district. I hope you move that direction rather than the direction of the first map. Thank you for this opportunity to provide my testimony.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, Helen Wood. You are up. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Helen Wood. I'm a voter from Charlotte, and I live in the Ballantyne neighborhood. Thank you for the chance to speak with you today. The proposed redistricting maps available to me are CBK3, CMT9, and CST2. None of them seems consistent with the criteria of the North Carolina legislature, and none is acceptable to me. Seems that the legislature put out the criteria, but didn't follow them in the case of Charlotte, or certainly of Ballantyne, where I live. The criteria require equal numbers in each district, and I'm no expert on that, but I assume this criterion has been met. But the criteria also require that counties, towns, and cities are to be left whole wherever possible. Yet all 3 maps split Charlotte into at least 3 proposed new districts, where 2 districts would certainly suffice. Both these maps score F on the Partisan Fairness Index as assessed by the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. As to my community in Ballantyne, we're a rapidly growing suburb of Charlotte, and we anticipate significant growth in the next decade, with the Ballantyne reimagined corporate park right in the middle. Instead of grouping Ballantyne with the rest of the urban, rapidly growing southern Charlotte, these maps group us with the large rural western NC13 district, or another map, large rural NC District 8. This will dilute our voices now and the voices of many newcomers that we anticipate this decade. Our votes will be outshone or overshadowed by those of the rural counties on one side of us or the other. I urge you to come up with fairer maps that meet your own criteria as legislators. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Thesis Carrero with the NALEO Educational Fund.
I'm here. Thank you so much.
You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, committee members, partner organizations, and members of our communities across North Carolina. My name is Thais Carrero, and I am the Mid-Atlantic Director of Civic Engagement for NALEO Educational Fund based in Raleigh. NALEO Educational Fund is the nation's leading nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that facilitates full Latino participation in the American political process, from citizenship to public service. After 2+ years working with partners across the state to ensure a fair and accurate census count, We appeared in front of this committee on September 22nd to make the case for an accessible, inclusive, and transparent redistricting process. Our goal is to ensure a redistricting process that produces maps that provide Latinos and underrepresented groups with a fair opportunity to elect leaders who are responsive and accountable to their communities. While we defer to our partners at NC Counts, Latino Justice, and MALDEF for specific comments on the proposed maps, we wish to state the need for an accessible, inclusive, and transparent process. We applaud the committee's decision to make the map drawing process accessible to the public online, as well as the opportunity to come to you today for feedback after the maps were released. Still, the current process carries some challenges that should be addressed. Number one, community members have not had enough time to properly analyze the maps and provide meaningful feedback today to this body. And non-interactive maps prevent community members from understanding exactly how the proposed maps affect their communities. Scheduling more hearings, providing more time for people to analyze the maps and provide feedback, as well as providing a tool to make the maps more digestible and interactive, is critical to ensure that maps produced by the legislature reflect the growth of our community and the need to ensure that we achieve fair representation through the new district lines. As the process of finalizing the maps moves forward, it is critical that the final maps provide Latinos and other underrepresented communities a fair opportunity to elect responsive and accountable representatives. And to achieve this goal, the maps must comply with the U.S. Constitution, the Federal Voting Rights Act, and must respect communities of interest. Our community members must be able to provide input to the legislature about their communities of interest to help inform our state's redistricting process. And we look forward to working with you to make this accessible, inclusive, and more transparent.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for your time.
Next up, we have Kevin Creech representing the Wake County Democrat Party. If you could please raise your hand. The mic is on. Kevin Creech, you're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my views on the proposed redistricting. My name is Kevin Creech, and I am chair of the Wake County Democratic Party and a native North Carolinian born and bred in eastern North Carolina. I have lived in Wake County for 28 years and in Apex for nearly 25. Over these 25 years, I have lived in 3 homes that are approximately 1.5 miles equidistant from one another. Over the last 10 or so years, Apex has suffered through ongoing gerrymandering and redistricting such that we've had individual precincts with multiple county and legislative districts. Apex has had multiple congressional districts. Personally, I have lived in 4 different congressional districts over the last decade, though I've only moved once, just up the street from my last home. I started in the 4th, was redrawn into the 13th, redrawn again into the 4th, and redrawn yet again into the 2nd. The result of constant district changes and gerrymandering here in Apex is that my neighbors, family, and I have lacked consistent representation for over a decade. The confusion wrought by never-ending lawsuits and moving lines means that my neighbors, family, and I have had our civic agency damaged for years. Leaders, you have been provided prescriptives over the past few years with how to fairly and consistently redistrict. As a native North Carolinian, I'm embarrassed that our state is often on national news as a top example for gerrymandering. North Carolina doesn't have to be the topic of late-night talk show jokes. You can fix this. We all know that North Carolina is a 50-50 state, and while much of Wake leans blue, North Carolina as a whole is purple. I ask that you follow the prescriptives laid out by Stevenson v. Bartlett, Common Cause v. Lewis, and the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. I ask that you avoid splitting counties and regions. I ask that you resist bifurcating representation in New Hanover, Mecklenburg, the Triad, and the Triangle. I want my voice and vote to mean something, and I also want the voices and votes of my fellow Carolinians to mean something. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, Marla Barthen, representing the League of Women Voters of the Lower Cape Fear. If you're there, please raise your hand. Okay. John Lingle. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Hello, I'm John Lingle, a private citizen. I moved to Davidson, North Carolina 21 years ago, drawn by the temperate climate and a balance of conservative and liberal voices. I'm increasingly distressed witnessing the loss of participatory democracy in our state. The GOP appears not to have learned from experience the last 10 years that cost the state millions in legal fights, most of which Republicans lost. The process and GOP draft maps are undemocratic. One, the GOP-led redistricting committee hasn't produced any report or account of public statements. Two, GOP draft maps don't follow repeated public requests for fair, non-gerrymandered maps. Three, the GOP claims it didn't look at incumbency or political party, yet somehow they took a 50-50 state and drew maps in which the GOP locked in 75% or more of the U.S. congressional seats. Four, the extreme gerrymandering maps created by the Republicans may well result in a supermajority for them once again. We are all familiar with some of the harmful legislation that produced last time. Five, the counties with the most population growth are punished in the GOP maps by being carved up, diluted, and denied fair representation. Rather than putting our new congressional district in a population growth area, it is handed to Tim Moore in a shrinking county for his future election. In conclusion, the GOP drafted maps are unfair and illegal. I implore you not to adopt them. Instead, adopt maps like CBK4 or SCH2 that are more compact, do not inappropriately split precincts or municipalities, or double bunk constituents.
Thank you for your comments. Yuri Yamamoto, representing the NCAAT.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
You're recognized. Thank you.
My name is Yuri Yamamoto, and I live in Raleigh in the 2nd Congressional District. As an Asian American immigrant, I say that the current redistricting process is not fair to our community. Asian American and Pacific Islanders are the fastest growing racial group in North Carolina. I believe that our community has specific needs. Many of us are recent immigrants and need official translation and interpretation services to participate in the redistricting process. Many of us are also unfamiliar with the redistricting process. We need more time to understand the information and articulate our responses. Personally speaking, trying to quickly understand how various proposed maps may impact my life and community has been overwhelming. I came to this country in 1984 and lived mostly in Raleigh. My husband and I have 6 US-born children and 2 grandchildren. In 2010, we became US citizens and began voting. All along, we have contributed to our community in many ways through our work, children's schools, buying things, paying taxes, volunteering, and donating money to help others. But I can't say that we've always felt welcome or included by the American society. I want fair representation for all groups of people, especially the Black, Indigenous people of color. I want to be able to elect representatives who are willing to listen to our stories and advocate for our needs, not just for the majority or the powerful. For that reason, I ask for more time on translation and interpretation services in the redistricting process. This is how we make America great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Harry Taylor, representing the League of Women Voters.
I'm Harry Taylor in Charlotte.
You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
I'm Harry Taylor in Charlotte. Today's hearing is offered to comment on maps that have been posted to the website. Deciphering the various iterations of those maps is complicated. What you are doing is not. Half the 7 million person electorate Doesn't vote the way you do, so to retain power, it's your obvious intent to rig the maps to sequester and lock away those votes for the next 10 years, rendering them powerless and meaningless. Ostensibly, we live in a democracy, but no way can rigging elections via gerrymandering be part of a democracy. It's an almost sacred promise, an idea, a vision. As Americans, it's our dream, where we, the people, have a role in the systems that govern our lives and future. It's fragile and requires gentle handling. It requires respect for people and their ideas, for your colleagues in the legislature, for the balance of power and the vision itself. It must be treated as such. It's not some foolish abstraction to ignore. We know fair and proportional maps can be drawn. Duke University professors demonstrated that more than 5 years ago. And there's several maps on your website that envision a 7-7 balance, not the 10-4 or 11-3 imbalance your colleague Dallas Woodhouse let slip back in May. My community of interest is North Carolina, 10.5 million people strong, from Murphy to Manteo, from Mount Airy to Southport. Despite proclamations from the legislature, we the people are not morons, not on Monday or any other day of the week. This is our state. It is not yours. If you'll honor, when we want a fair and fully functioning democracy, if you'll honor that, we'll support you every single day of the week. If it's not, it's time to move out and get out of the way for those who will. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Deborah Dimsky. Please raise your hand. Nothing.
Hi,
Hey, thank you. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
thank you. I'm Deborah Dimsky. I'm a software support analyst, and I live in South Ardmore, the neighborhood in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. My House rep is Evelyn Terry in District 71. My Senate rep is Paul Lowe in District 32. And my United States rep is Kathy Manning in District 6. I'm speaking only for myself, just so you know. And I feel like that this process has been too rushed. There's been inadequate time for citizen notification about the new proposed maps, how to find them, how to evaluate them. There's also been inadequate citizen notification about the hearings that we're participating in now. I only just heard about this Saturday. And so it really doesn't give even those of us who are usually put things on our calendar time to know what we need to do. So this has definitely been a rush job. When I look at the maps, which for the very little bit I've been able to, the most important characteristic to me is the competitiveness of the proposed districts. Especially on a local level, I want to vote for candidates who I think have good ideas and good reasons for their opinions on various issues. The maps I've had time to study so far aren't even as competitive as the current maps. And I'm wondering, what happened in the last 10 years to make us less competitive when we should be more so? I'm really disappointed with these maps. I respectfully request that the members return to the drawing board and fix them to meet at least our current standards of competitiveness at a minimum. There are many groups watching our maps. North Carolina was court appointed to redraw after the last maps were created because of racial inequity.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Grace Krosky. If you could raise your hand. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
We voted in 2022 in the 11th Congressional District that currently is represented by an 8th generation, if his biography is to be believed, Madison Cawthorn, who right this minute has got 95,000 tweets concerning his participation in the events of January 6th of this year. My concern, being a northerner coming south, is that I currently vote in Wisconsin, and Mr. Cawthorn seems to feel that he knows a lot more about what happened up here than I do, who voted here. And I can assure him and anyone else in North Carolina concerned about what happens in Wisconsin, we didn't have any fraud. My vote counted, and Joe Biden won Wisconsin. Right now, I see the voting maps that are proposed for North Carolina to not exactly fit in with the Voting Rights Act of 1965 or the proposed but currently shelved John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I would hope that you all on the committee understand what is at stake here could ultimately end up being reviewed by a lot more people than just your constituents, who uniformly so far from my hearing are not particularly happy with how you're voting for this rushed and or partisan and or racially inequitable situation. Unless you want to continue following in what Mr. Cawthorn says is Wisconsin's future, you need to understand that there's going to be other people looking at what's going on, and that the people are not going to tolerate having their power taken from them, and that gerrymandering as a political tool of power's days are over. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Nicole Peterson. If you could raise your hand. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Peterson, and I've lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for 11 years in Congressional District 12, represented now by Alma Adams. I'm here because in some maps, my city will be split in 4 ways, like CMT 9, diluting its votes by combining it with other surrounding counties. Most proposed maps also dilute votes by creating districts that fail to represent the 50-50 split of the state between Republican and Democrat. As a couple of people have mentioned, we're a purple state, and we need to really show that in our representation. Some could lead to districts where to 11 districts represented by Republicans and only 3 represented by Democrats in some of the worst cases. Only a few have a likely 50-50 split of 7 representatives for each, including CBK 4 and 5 and CST 8. I'm tired of seeing a lack of representation of my votes and values in the North Carolina congressional representatives. My representation is a constitutional right, as it is for the other people in my state. Also, some maps are going to lead to losing Black representatives, like Alma Adams, my congressional representative, who has fought tirelessly so her constituents can get food and the agricultural supports they need, among other things. Our communities need people who know them and are part of their communities and can represent their interests. Finally, I am appalled that we have had just a few days to understand these maps and their impacts. This process is deeply flawed and undemocratic. We deserve better than rushed, ill-informed maps and even more rushed deliberations. Real representation means maps that represent us politically and racially, or we're going to face lots of lawsuits and lots of issues in the coming years. Thank you for giving me and these other really smart people time to comment on the maps. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Donna Rousseau. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity to testify. I, too, only had maybe 48 hours before having the opportunity to review this very complicated material. I've been a resident of North Carolina for 17 years. I have been actively engaged in my political rights. I feel that from what I can tell, there is definitely a lot of gerrymandering going on, and it is unacceptable. And we need more time so that more people can become involved. This caught me off guard, and I tell you, my heart is broken. I love my new state that I've lived for 17 and a half years, and I think that we can do better. I wish that I had more articulation to be able to express my concern over the maps, but I just simply haven't had the opportunity to review them well enough to talk about them. But from what I see, I can tell that communities are being broken apart and other communities are being put with communities that have nothing to do with them. And that's really not acceptable. So thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to a change, and I look forward to more time for all of us to be able to review this very important time in our history.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next up, we would have Keith Graham, although he was moved to the earlier meeting that was coming in. So we'll have Bridget Tarrant. Got it? If you could raise your hand. Bridget Tarrant. No show. Carl Crozier. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
All right, thank you. My name is Carl Crozier, and I've been a resident of Beaufort County since 1995. My wife and I have raised 3 children that attended public schools all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade. We learned firsthand about our strong community identity. We volunteered with schools, county sporting events. I'm a member of a Salvation Army advisory board that serves 6 counties. We have a diverse community, but it has a lot of common interests. We want to see our children have educational opportunities and have job opportunities. We want to make it through hurricane season safely. We'd like to see transportation and Wi-Fi infrastructure as priorities and balance all this with a clean environment because we enjoy the communities we live in. I hope that redistricting provides us with effective representation by people that understand and appreciate our unique characteristics, but I am disappointed to see maps proposed that seem to treat redistricting like a numbers game and do not respect rational geographic communities. The most blatant examples for the Beaufort County area are U.S. Congressional Maps CBK3 and CST2. Beaufort County on the coast is linked by a narrow corridor of counties that reach west of Raleigh along the Virginia state line. Also, State Senate Map SST4, we have 3 districts that share many common coastal interests, 1, 2, and 3. District 2 bisects these in a zigzag fashion so we split many of the common interests in a bizarre fashion. I would like to thank you for your service, but please remember this is not a game, and we need to address our unique problems with the power that effective representation provides. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have T1 Gossi representing Common Cause. Is he up? Is he muted on his end, or? Try again. T1 Gossi, representing Common Cause. He has disappeared from our screen. So we'll move on. Aaron Hope. Is he ready? You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes. Is he muted? He's muted his end. Aaron, we believe you are muted on your end. On Arian. We just can't hear him. Aaron, we'll try one more, see if you can make any contacts. We don't seem to be able to hear you at all, and it does not seem to be muted. If you could, check your mic and we will come back.
Hello?
Oh, there you are.
Oh, sorry, I had to adjust the settings. I apologize. My name is Aaron Hope, and I live in Wake County, and I also work in Durham County, and I just want to speak to the maps and just the process in general. I remember hearing reports that this was going to be an open and transparent process, and at the same time, just getting a hold of the maps, I think over the weekend with an opportunity to speak today, I really only signed up because I wasn't sure anyone was going to be able to make it in time to actually speak on the maps. But I have just kind of been able to glance at them for the most part and, just get an idea of what's going on here. And I mean, when I look at, SSC4 and the way that Wake and Durham County are basically chopped up like puzzle pieces, and other maps that, where Wake County and Durham County are kind of grouped in with other sections of the state that are not really, that don't really have the same vibe and feel and interest, things that they would need representation for. With that, I think about my particular area, and I think, I see the urban centers and some suburban areas, being grouped in with rural areas. I really feel like, there's the potential for folks to really not have their representation aligned. And that, in my opinion, and in my experience, is just a disaster. And this is just very disturbing. I mean, it's apropos because we're coming up on Halloween. These maps are scary. And to me, it really deserves another look. Potentially, if there was one ask that I could give, I don't know how much time I have, it would be for an independent map making system to be put in place for fairness, equality, and for there to be racial equity as well. I can't look at these and say that there's racial animus in these maps, but I bet you if we had adequate time to study them, we would really find that. Regardless of the way they came together, the appearance of the maps themselves do lend themselves to for substantial partisan gerrymandering.
Thank you for your comments. You've exceeded your time. Lee Mortimer, if you're recognized for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Lee Mortimer, resident of Durham, been a resident of North Carolina most of my life. A few years ago, I read an article in Slate magazine about a Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling that made partisan fairness and partisan balance part of their state's redistricting criteria. Like North Carolina, Pennsylvania is an evenly divided state, but its congressional delegation had 13 Republicans and only 5 Democrats. The court threw out the old districts and drew new ones. In the next 2 elections, 2018 and 2020, Pennsylvania voters elected an evenly divided congressional delegation, 9 Republicans and 9 Democrats. I asked myself, could North Carolina use the Pennsylvania example for our redistricting? I wrote an article that ran last week in the Greensboro News and Record, the Winston-Salem Journal, and the Independent Tribune in Concord. Interested viewers can find the article by Googling my name, Lee Mortimer, articles, and redistricting. But especially find and read the Slate article by Googling Pennsylvania Restores Democracy and Slate. This started when I learned consultants have been advising our state Democrats that they can expect to win only 5, maybe 6 of our 14 congressional seats, even if they get more votes than Republicans. They say it's because Democrats are clustered in urban and metropolitan areas, while Republicans are more spread out. Senators Clark and Chaudhry may have found a path to 7 seats. Districts they've drawn are compact, divide relatively few counties, and look logical on the map. The underlying partisan data in both their plans shows Republicans would get 6 safe districts and 1 that leans their way. Democrats would get 4 or 5 safe districts, 1 or 2 that lean Democrat, and 1 district in both plans that's a dead heat. If the stars align, Democrats could gain their fair share of seats, but with just a small deviation, they could win 50% or more of the vote and get less than 40% of the seats. It could be a path to fair redistricting, but it's not as certain as Pennsylvania's path, where partisan balance and partisan fairness were integral to drawing their state's congressional districts. Thank you for making this time available.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, Judith Kramer. Ready? You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Judith Kramer. I've been a resident of North Carolina for over 50 years, and I've lived in Chatham County for the last 3 years. I'm here to comment on North Carolina House District Map HBK 11. I'm pleased to see that Chatham County was kept whole in that map. However, District 56, created by combining Chatham County with 3 Randolph County precincts, Liberty, Staley, and Providence, will be close to 5% higher than the target population size, while the rest of the districts in the county grouping would all be 3 to 5% smaller than the ideal district size. The large size of District 56 would be a problem because Chatham is among the fastest growing counties in North Carolina. If this map goes forward, shortly after its creation, District 56 will be too large. Between then and the next census in 10 years, Chatham County residents will have less ability to influence the outcome of elections with their vote. Randolph County's Providence precinct should not be included in District 56. It does not even share a border with Chatham. Combining Liberty and Staley precincts with Chatham would result in a population in the target range, but with room to grow. It is not necessary to also add Providence precinct to District 56 unless there is a motive of partisan gerrymandering to dilute the growing Democratic majority in Chatham County. Between 2016 and 2020, votes in Chatham County were 55% Democratic and 44% Republican, while votes in Providence precinct in the same period were 16% Democratic and 82% Republican. I request that you remove Providence precinct from House District 56 and include it in House District 60 or 61, both of which are adjacent to Providence, considerably below their target population size, and more consistent with the rural nature of those 2 districts. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. I will take a moment to remind the speaker's purpose of this hearing is to hear public comments on the congressional maps that have been placed. Next up, we have Christopher Larkin, or Lakin. Yeah, you're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm from Charlotte. I've lived there most of my life, retired pediatrician. It would be hard for me to say anything probably that hasn't already been said, but I think with the current setup, and as was said, both parties have been guilty of gerrymandering. We have a situation, as do many other states, where the politicians choose their voters instead of the voters choosing their leaders. And obviously that's not how a democracy works. I think the ultimate answer, of course, is the end of gerrymandering. For example, having an independent commission, which is outside the scope of this discussion, but I think that will take it. And I hope we find a day where public commentary on redistricting would maybe hardly even be necessary if we knew from experience and from restructuring of how districts are drawn that we could assume fairly safely that they would be fair, but we don't have that today. So for now, I feel that both parties need to demonstrate that they do truly care about fair voting and draw non-partisan districts even before like a commission, fair, foresee, and without nonpartisan redistricting, almost none of the other components of fair voting will matter. I appreciate this time to speak. I echo the sentiments that we needed more time to look at the maps. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Chris Mansfield.
There you go. Yeah, good evening.
You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. I'm Chris Mansfield, an unaffiliated voter in Pitt County. And I've had a chance to look at the 7 congressional maps that were posted. Not much time to do it, but I think they look better than what we had before. Less splitting, more compact. The real issue is whether any will result in competitive races, proportional representation, and bipartisan dialogue. The 3 most likely to do that, I think, are CBK 4, CBK 5, and CST 6. The state Senate map, SST 4, has a lot of splitting, stacking the deck, I think, for Republicans, preserving incumbency, and producing little competition. The House maps, HBK 11, I guess, looks like it's going to produce mostly safe seats. And I'm concerned about Pitt County. It looks like most of the Democrats have been packed into House 8. And the analytics I looked at indicate that a Democrat has like a 99% chance of winning in 8, whereas in 7, about 30 to 40%. You split it this time east to west rather than north to south. I ask you not to disrespect the citizens of North Carolina by rigging the elections from the start. Making us vote on candidates who have no chance of winning or are certain to be elected. When there's no real choice, there's no real voice. Gerrymandering results, as we all know, in extreme partisanship, no discussion, no compromise, no collaborative problem solving. We want democracy to be a competition of ideas.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
That's coming in. Next up, Allison Allen Mongo, representing the Young Democrats of North Carolina. Let's call Allison Allen Mongo. Please raise your hand. Okay, moving on. Kate Feldman, representing You Can Vote. Kate Feldman, if you would please raise your hand. So you're up. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Hello, I'm Kate Feldman. I've lived in Durham since 2005, and I'm the executive director of You Can Vote. I'm here today to voice my concerns for representation of young voters and students in North Carolina. I'm a mother of 2 students who will be voters in 2022, and I'm blessed to have worked with hundreds of student volunteers and interns across North Carolina that are passionate about equal representation and voting rights. In the last 10 years, though, students have had their polling places changed, their districts split from their those of their classmates, and the rules for voting have changed in between each election. The 18 to 25 demographic is a critical population of our state. They are our future leaders, and they deserve to be included in decision-making and to be kept whole as a community while living on campus. When an NC citizen gains the right to vote, we should do everything we can to encourage and support them in casting their ballot to become involved citizens. The students I speak to are not yet savvy about how to look up and contact their representative, or furthermore, how to attend hearings and provide public comment, as is pretty obvious today by our speakers. But they do know that they deserve representation that listens and addresses their concerns. And they also know that the current system of drawing maps and electing representatives from those maps is harming their future prospects. They deserve to understand this process, and they deserve representation that asks for and hears their voices. Making drastic changes to maps, double bunking legislators, and allowing for incumbent data to take priority over communities of interest means that students will continue to be marginalized in this process when they should be a priority community of interest for the future of all of North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Louis Godol, or Gadol. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak up for fairness and good ethics on this important occasion. I am Dr. Louis Godol. I live in Durham, and I have my wife, children, and grandchildren here as well. I am a retired mental health treatment provider and administrator. I speak on behalf of my family, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Hillsborough, and the North Carolina chapter of the Sierra Club. No matter what process is used to draw these redistricting maps, the outcome is what matters. The only acceptable plan is an even balanced 7-7 Democrat-Republican split. That would reflect accurately party membership in our state, and 2 7-7 plans earned A's from the Princeton Gerrymandering Project, and all of the other plans earned F's.
I'll go back to them all, yeah.
I've examined their rating criteria and consider them valid and thorough. Similar criteria should be used to create an even and fair split in the plan for the state General Assembly positions. Both of the current ones earned F's. I wish all of you well in this endeavor to do what's right for the people of North Carolina.
Thank you for your comments. Members, next on the list, I have Lewis Carson, but we do not see him on and believe that he spoke at the previous meeting. If I'm wrong, please raise your hand. I will now go back through the no-shows and call those out, and if you would raise your hand in case we had missed someone. Martha Shaffer. We believe you're waving. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'm a 9th generation North Carolinian and have lived in Guilford County for about 30 years. I'm a retired healthcare executive and a parent and a caretaker of my elderly mother. In September, I attended and spoke at the public hearing in Forsyth County and expressed a lot of reasons that Guilford County should be kept whole in a congressional map. Further, I believe that the 3 cities that anchor the Piedmont Triad, Greensboro, High Point, and Winston-Salem, should be kept together as they are now. Many residents of the Triad expressed similar views. However, the congressional maps drawn by the Republican leadership ignored our local input. All 3 of their congressional maps split Guilford County into 2 or even 3 districts, which is unnecessary, is confusing for residents, and results in districts that maximize the influence of rural residents at the expense of urban ones. We've been through this before when you split Guilford County between 2 congressional districts, and we know it doesn't result in good representation for us. The maps under consideration have parts of Guilford County grouped with Ashe County in the mountains and Harnett County in the east, which is an area I grew up driving through a lot, but it has little to nothing in common with Guilford County. On the other hand, we have way more in common with High Point, which is in our own county. When I first looked at these maps, I honestly wondered if they were real, because the districts are not compact and they don't show respect for communities of interest, criteria that you are supposed to be using. So in conclusion, please keep all of Guilford County in one district, preferably along with Winston-Salem, so our voices will be best represented. Thank you.
Brent Heath. Please raise your hand. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Well, I'd like to express my appreciation to the committee for the most transparent district drawings that I think I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I'm very pleased to, as I look at the maps, I see that you have made a strong effort in following the North Carolina Constitution and trying to follow the plan that has been established by our Constitution and having fair districts. I'm not an advocate of trying to have equal representation of the parties, because we're not a divided state 50-50. In North Carolina, we have practically 30% Republican, 30% Democrats, and 30% unaffiliateds. And that being said, the unaffiliateds need a voice as well, without telling them which party they would have to vote for by doing a 50-50 divide. But I just want to thank the joint committee for a job well done. I think the proposed maps are as fair as I've seen in recent years. And you don't have maps that are stretching across bunches of counties that have the counties divided just to pick out a district for one party over the other. Just wanted to say job well done, and thank you for your efforts in this redistricting this year. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Marla Barthen, representing the League of Women Voters of the Lower Cape Fear. If you could raise your hand. Still not here as a no-show. Bridget Tarrant. No show. T1 Gossi, representing Common Cause. Still do not see. And last, Allison Allen Mongo, representing the Young Democrats of North Carolina. Nope. Well, thank you all so much for your comments. That concludes the list of individuals who signed up to make public comment and therefore exhaust the agenda of this committee meeting. I thank you all for being here and thank you for your comments. And this meeting will stand adjourned.